Is this the right time to panic, Williams fans? Is your hype train already off the rails before it even left the station? Because if there was one team that the entire F1 collective wanted to see succeed, or at least do better, it would be that one. The Barcelona shakedown is underway, and F1's handling of it so far has frustrated fans. Seriously, you either make it private, no dabbling on social media, you keep it absolutely silent, or you just give us full broadcasting like you do for traditional testing, and even then we're getting less of that. And then, on day 2, there are reports from the circuit that police helicopters are being used to suppress curious fans and the like. Seriously, you need this much considering that you're plastering video and photos of the cars on your own socials? Not exactly a smooth operation, which could be considered for the likes of James Vowles' operation, because his team has made the bold and seemingly worrying decision to skip the event entirely. Not late, not partially, just absent. Naturally, this has left everybody a bit panicked, and yeah, there are 6 official days of testing ahead, but these kind of rumours are not helping the belief that everyone's had about this team for many years now. For now though, here is what Williams officially said on their own channels for your consideration. Atlassian Williams F1 team has taken the decision not to participate in next week's shakedown test in Barcelona following delays in the FW48 program, as we continue to push for maximum car performance. The team will instead conduct a series of tests including a virtual test track program next week, with the 2026 car to prepare for the first official test in Bahrain and the first race of the season in Melbourne. We are looking forward to getting on track in the coming weeks and want to thank all of our fans for your continued support. There is a lot to look forward to together in 2026. Yeah, it likely stings because there were plans for them to attend, but within a few days of the actual event starting on Monday, they decided to pull out like this. And all of this fueling speculation that they've got a car that is not race ready, as well as many other rumours that have amassed, trying to either say that the car is vastly overweight and therefore it's not competitive, that the car isn't ready because it's not passed the FIA crash test. One persistent rumour after another, but as I'll talk about later, the FIA crash test thing, according to the race, they have actually passed it. It just took them a little longer than they would have liked. And given that many fans had plenty of fear-mongering energy intended to be going in Red Bull Racing's direction, and day 1 proved to actually have no worries for that team whatsoever, all of that energy is understandably headed over to Williams. So what's going on here? Is it time to push the panic button, or is there something else afoot here that maybe Williams has just taken a look at what's going on at that test and how it's all played out now and are thinking, is it really worth going there? Really? I get it. You want some kind of binary conclusion. Either the hype train is dead or there's 4D chess afoot, but it's all a matter about the wishy-washy phrase that nobody likes to hear. It depends. First of all, there is that statement. What does it say and not say? It's not immediately reading like some kind of dismissal of the test outright, or that they're up to something spicy. They wouldn't give a game away like that. No. It flat out says there are delays in the FW48 program, framing it as some kind of noble pain in pushing for maximum car performance. And that to me reads like Farquhar from Shrek 1, a movie which I think Martin Brundle was definitely not disappointed with. But the part that jumps out especially is them using the word program. That does sound a little scary on first glance because it may mean the car exists, but the whole chain is not ready yet. Therefore, the car is not usable. All of the stuff that comes with the car, which includes spare parts, the facilities, the software, the transportation, the understandings, the workflows, the data streams, all of that stuff, even the paperwork to make sure this car can go safely at 200 miles an hour, week in, week out, is not up to snuff yet. And since every other team is actually at the Circuit de Catalunya and will be getting some time in, either today, tomorrow, Thursday or Friday, and Williams are not, that is understandably hair-raising. But if we zoom out to the entire context of this particular week, it is a little bit of a weird situation, and a very unusual one to boot. Quite frankly, I expected to see and hear nothing from this shakedown weekend. The most we could have possibly anticipated were snippets from journalists and media representatives that were allowed to be at the track, but they couldn't shoot anything. But no, we haven't got any of that at all. We can actually see the cars out there, leaving the pits, going around the track, in 4K quality. And then all of the reports that we've heard from various people on the ground being pushed further and further back from the circuit, and even in public territory, and they're being told they're trespassing, which in of itself is weird. They can't even be half a mile from the circuit without being told to move along. And again, they are now using police helicopters for just standing somewhere. You may not necessarily be an F1 fan. You might be there just walking your dog. I haven't even got to the part about all the stuff we're talking about online, with all of that live timing, the leaks somehow getting it out there for us all to see on live streams, then that getting nuked, other streams popping up and they'll probably be nuked too, and all of the other stuff that we are hearing and seeing and honestly living through. All of this complete and utterly self-inflicted chaos on Formula One's part. They tried to keep it secret, but it seems like, oh, we need the clicks, so here, pictures! Thusly, we're all in a bit of a conspiratorial mood, and Williams has been the biggest and most obvious target since, well, they're not there. What is the dealio with that? Because other threads are being ripped apart in real time. First of all, there is that statement from Williams that they wouldn't be participating, aiming for Bahrain for their physical debut. Then there's the fact that we're starting on-track running a lot earlier than before. Many weeks, in fact. Everything has been compressed thusly, and even the most competent of teams can trip over a few deadlines in that kind of environment. The team has since passed a supposed failed FIA crash test that can be consistent with a failed test previously, or with Williams discovering an issue and reinforcing the design of their own accord. And that reinforcing can lead to potential weight gain and ensuring that car or part doesn't snap like a twig. Then there's the virtual test. According to Planet F1, Williams is likely using AVL's facility in Austria, the world's largest independent simulation and testing company for drive systems. Very important that. Drive systems. So running the FW48 in that particular simulation and then potentially comparing it to their own simulator in Oxfordshire, they might be able to try and run through a testing program of their own around a simulated map of the Circuit de Catalunya, doing everything that they intended to do on the track whilst actually not being at the track. So I think Williams here are perhaps going big when it comes to data flows, in a similar way that I talked about last week with Mercedes, that they are really betting the farm when it comes to software and managing the energy through said software and computational data. Hence why they went so hard with that $60 million a year contract with Microsoft. But yeah, I talked about weight, that is the loudest rumour going, or at least it was. According to the Spanish publication Soy Motor, they were allegedly around 20 to 30 kilos overweight. Even worse when they were overweight back in 2024, when that essentially costed them nearly half a second per lap. That original source, according to the Twitter account Natchez, has since walked back that original suggestion, so it might not be as stark as it was originally alluded to. But I get why it spread, since it can happen, a car being overweight, but what is happening then, I hear you ask? Well, Williams might have found themselves in a situation where they intended to bring a really, truly, genuinely aggressive design, a really, really bold one, but then they realised for themselves, with potentially a failed FIA crash test, that they went too big, too hard, too fast, too soon. That isn't strange, and quite frankly, in their rebuilding phase, they might have bitten off a little bit more than they could have chewed. Because I recall a situation where Adrian Newey designed a Red Bull front wing, and it proved to be too thin, it failed a crash test, therefore they had to expand it out a little bit, go for a more conservative approach. That might have happened here with Williams, that it could actually give you a little bit of confidence about this team, that they are not choosing to play it safe in 2026, and they're going for glory. They might have just gone for glory a little bit too hard. So therefore, as the race alluded to, they might have been forced to reinforce that design, and therefore it might have compromised their original concept. So therefore, they would have to then make all of those parts again. They may not necessarily have enough of those to go properly testing and have redundancy, and therefore you may not have the most ideal car to go testing with. And given how public it's turned out to be, that might not have been the worst thing in the world for Williams to endure. Time is added, money is added, weight is added, to therefore understandably cause a stall in the program. So then you could say they would decide to then skip the first shakedown test to make sure that whatever impression they cast when that car debuts is a good one. Yeah, I hear you cry. Oh, you're just getting out your cup of copium and hoping for the best, you Williams fan, you. First of all, I'm not a Williams fan, I'm a Williams well-wisher. I want to see them do well for a legacy team, of course. But the fact is, though, is that I don't think it's the end of the world right now. If this were happening for day one of the first Bahrain test, or them skipping that first test altogether, then I would be worried. But let's make Barcelona clear. Teams can only run 3 of the 5 days given to them. They could have shown up later, say Wednesday, and still used all 3 days. McLaren, Ferrari and Aston chose not to roll out on day 1 for very deliberate reasons. Now imagine you're James Vowles and you have two decisions to make. You can either rush the car and run it round the Circuit de Catalunya with a bodge job car that you're not happy with entirely, with a limited part spin, which could either lead to cautious running time or more time tweaking in the pit lane rather than actually out on the circuit, or you just take the public lashings and refine the car in 100% private circumstances, instead of this weird chimera that we're getting right now. We all thought it was going to be private, but it doesn't seem to be private at all. We can see everything, but on very awkward and strict terms. Therefore, the team can then arrive at Bahrain, where everyone's out there, the cards are out on the table, Williams have at least their car for the first time, they may have an understanding about what's going on with the other team's cars, and they can just hit the ground running, or at least we hope they would hit the ground running, with a car that they like and that they hope that we like. So why bother wasting time around a circuit with a car that may not be the final article that goes for the second pre-season test in Bahrain or even Australia? There may not be any point. And then perhaps face a setback due to a systems failure or worse, a crash. Williams refusing to do what Williams has done in the past. Show up underbaked, burn time in public, then spend weeks frantically trying to fix the damn thing. 2019 and 24 being two recent examples. Unlike those examples though, the team is framing this as a setback rather than a catastrophic collapse that could see people leave their jobs. I'm looking at you, Paddy Lowe. The drivers aren't sweating buckets, at least not yet, but I get why there is a mass panic, because since the beginning of the 2025 season, it's all looked absolutely gravy for Williams. It's been one good news story after another. More sponsors, a fantastic result in the constructors, podiums, both drivers happy and working together harmoniously. Then we get this and it's suddenly like, oh no! It's jarring to say the least. But let's get back to that virtual test track program, because that could be a very important situation and something that goes back to the thing that we've heard countless times since the ground effect era actually. Correlation. From what I can gather, a VTT style rig, as they called it in the statement, lets you run the full car and power unit through repeated lap profiles and stress cases. This year, energy recovery and deployment is a bigger driving factor, 50-50 actually, and active aero models also change the speed profile into braking zones. And that's something that Pirelli talked about a few months ago when they were discussing who was where in the pecking order and the effects of the brand new regulations would have on their tyres. The flaps go up and down, they change within the corners, there are multiple stresses going onto the compound. They can stretch and compress the tyres many more times than they would have done without those particular wings. It's a learning experience for Pirelli as well. So Williams taking the Digimon approach to Formula 1 right now before the first proper test could be a little bit of a masterstroke and a way to save a massive amount of time and resources. They might be believing that correlation is the crucial thing that could get them out of the midfield and into the front-running top four, pushing one of those teams out of it. All in a controlled environment away from the cameras in the sanctity of a private company, free from many FIA restrictions that you would have had at this particular test, and away from all of the cameras and fans trying to get a good look at you, and without the worry of a red flag occurring, because we've had quite a few of those already. We're only just into day 2. I think as of this recording, Max Verstappen went off at turn 5 and that triggered another red flag. And with wind tunnel and CFD time tightly restricted under the current rules, simulation quality can be a real edge. Should Williams nail this approach, it could yet prove to be a game changer. Do what they do in the aerospace industry. Build a digital twin, where the car's behaviour is validated at specialist facilities against their own hardware back at base. It also fits around the broader Dorilton era narrative upgrading processes and systems. Dorilton's Matthew Savage, for example, told Vowles that they don't mind finishing 10th for 3 years in a row as long as the 2026 car was good. Long-term engineering choices over short-term optics. Which may explain why we have seen in the last few years since James has taken charge, they just take PR hits with all of the vitriol that comes with it and just get on with the job. For example, Logan Sargent being benched but having done nothing wrong, just so that means Alex Albon might have a chance of scoring a point, which he ultimately didn't. He finished 11th around the Australian Grand Prix, and James got drubbed for it. And then getting rid of Logan entirely. All of these big decisions, these key decisions, Williams just rolled with it and they didn't really care about the consequences because, well, their investors were more than happy for them to do it, so long as it improved the long-term outlook. But no matter what they do, the intensity of the scrutiny from the media is going to be immense, especially where this test is located, in Spain. And who is affected? A Spanish driver. Carlos Sainz is not getting to race around that circuit. And all of these sources and all of this chatter are coming from Spanish-speaking outlets, all in the pursuit of making Williams look incompetent and are calling and baying for James's blood. Even though Carlos Sainz has gone on the record saying he's not entirely bothered and that they're chasing maximum performance, and if this is one way to do it, then that's what they're going to do. They don't seem to be troubled. Alex has said the same thing. It's not ideal, but we'll take it. And there is a very big difference between saying something is not ideal and something is not good. Okay, Law, is it game over for Williams or not? Well, if you made it this far into the video, I'd hope that you'd be thinking, well, no, it's not game over at all. I've got more for you. But okay, I'll admit, if they had passed that FIA crash test the first time of asking, they would be in Spain doing the thing like everyone else because everyone's in the same playing field. But they've had to make alterations, seemingly, that are not in keeping with their original and most perfect vision of their car. And if they decided to just come here with a bit of a bodge job, then they probably would have had to run that little bit more carefully with limited parts or maybe no spare parts at all. And would they be able to get proper representative data with a compromised car with limited parts, so that means you have to be really cautious? No, it would have been a complete waste of time. You would have not really been able to get anything useful at all. At proper running speed, you wouldn't have been able to lean on the car like Red Bull Ford's doing right now, what Mercedes are doing right now. And it's important to remember that Williams have not missed a test session per se. They've missed a very quirky and unique shakedown test. A shakedown is just that, shaking out the cobwebs, whereas a test, well, we all know what that is. And when we look to what's been going on right now, Audi and Cadillac have suffered day one issues. They ran slower and barely got any laps in. And in Audi's case, almost a tenth of the laps that Mercedes-powered cars were able to accrue. Doesn't mean that Williams is off the hook, but it does help remind us all that engineering can be messy, with 2026 especially gruesome looking. The real nightmare, like I said, would be them missing a day around a proper test. Or if they went out for an installation app on day one there, and then spent most of said day in the garage nursing the car, which is exactly what happened with Gabriel Bortoleto at Audi over in Spain. The more optimistic read would be that they decided to swallow the bitter pill right now, so that means they can just get to Bahrain and just go and go and go and go with a car that they are more happy with. Get real representative data with a car that is much closer to what it might look like around Australia. Because, as we have been told time and time again, live timings do not matter when it comes to testing. The shakedown doubly so. It's the lap count which is the most important factor here. And who was out on top here? Well, you gotta look to what Haas was doing with 154 laps banked on day one alone with Esteban Ocon at the wheel. No wonder he was grinning like a Cheshire cat. They went out there with their lovely Toyota Gazoo-backed livery and were championing that Gazoo absolutely splendiferously. 154 times of us hearing, down the start-finish straight, seriously, that was incredible. For the smallest team on the grid to do that, a team who prides themselves on execution, yeah, this was a really good example as to why lap counts are very important. But that being said, one day of testing times are not a prophecy, nor is one day of lap counts, because it could easily be undone with the days to come. But definitely, day one saw Red Bull and Mercedes as the two standout cars of the day. So that does tell you that Red Bull Ford are at least functioning in the real world and can feel confident enough to push the car harder than other teams can. And with Mercedes being equally as solid, that's encouraging for their customers, Williams and McLaren. One less variable to worry about, so that means they can focus on the chassis. And then there was what George Russell said, and I'm paraphrasing here, looking at what Red Bull was able to do with Isaac Hadjar, and he goes, "Blimey, I didn't think our competition was going to be that good. Oh, we're going to have a bit of a challenge on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. It's not 2014. Everyone just going, hooray, it's not 2014! Except Toto. I think he would like to see 2014. Look at the FW36 of 2014. A car which wasn't the best aerodynamically, but went like stink anyway. Enough to secure third in the Constructors. But I can't imagine Williams wishing to rely on that approach again, the power unit doing all the heavy lifting, because it would prove nothing as to how far Williams has come with everything else that's been developed and changed and improved. But hey, one rumour I've definitely not heard is that Williams have had problems of integrating the Mercedes power unit of 2026. Not one iota in that regard, so that's a good thing. Something of which Alpine were reportedly having troubles with that Mercedes power unit, they just could not turn it on. Now, Flavio, a word to the wise. Might I suggest buying it dinner first? And even though I said Dorilton Capital aren't worried, could they act if this year is a flop for this team? They could, but Dorilton's public stance has been really clear. They've embraced the pain thus far for a payoff later, and if they have to wait a little bit longer, they've already made a very decent return on their investment. And that being said, fans are still quite tense because there is a date on that supposed payoff, and dates cause deadlines, which deadlines then create pressure. So where does that leave us? Well, missing Barcelona isn't great. It's a self-inflicted handicap in a year where everyone is at absolute zero. But the handicap they've given themselves might be the cost of trying something different to the other teams, choosing to fix their compromised car properly, rather than limp through a fake shakedown for the sake of appearances, and to learn their car inside and out at the start of the season. Because the scariest thing an F1 team can face right now is the unknown. Not knowing whether or not a problem you have with the car is a superficial one you can fix with an upgrade or a simple patch, or if it's a fundamental one. Say it's a chassis situation which takes longer to improve, or more often than not, it's something you're just going to have to live with for the entirety of 2026. And right now, Williams has chosen to give us uncertainty wrapped around corporate calm. And us humans, we do not like uncertainty. We wish to find answers to absolutely everything to try and find an explanation, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm aware of the irony of that statement. But all of this, I think, is in the pursuit of ensuring that when they get to the Bahrain International Circuit, they can just plug in that car and get on with the job with no problems whatsoever. They have plenty of parts, they understand their car completely, they have correlated their simulator back at Grove to the best of their ability with the supposed help from AVL in Austria, and if we get to a situation where Williams at the end of day 6 in Bahrain has one of the highest lap counts of the entire grid, then we'll all know for sure that them skipping out on Barcelona was worth it after all. And also less time for teams to react to a potential innovation they might have actually cooked up, since they started development on the 2026 car sooner than anyone else. Because I bet my bottom dollar that there are people working for teams dressed up in civvy clothes with official tabards from the F1 world that are doing their damnedest to get little convenient shots. That means they can pass through the data. With Williams not there, they ain't getting any of that from Vowles' team. And there might be a situation like with Mercedes' DAS solution that they might just want to keep things under wraps for as long as possible, so that means there is no time before the first few races of the season for any teams to come up with a fix or a counter. And of course the drivers sounding confident, that helps too. And total secrecy is often the price to pay if you want to have total surprise. And given what F1's done with this shakedown test, we are left with no surprise because they basically have no secrecy, really. So until then, the most honest answer I can give you is no. They are not in trouble. It is not game over for Williams. No. Think of it as the team trying to find their own way of avoiding an apology tour across 24 races for 2026 after all of the years of promise that they've given their fans, and if they come up short with them near the back once again, they want to ensure that doesn't happen. They do not want to half-arse a job, and they would have done exactly that if they turned up around Barcelona with a car that had to be a quick fix. Now what they could do in this simulator is come up with a car that passed the FIA crash test, which have now been officially confirmed from multiple sources, and then start to redefine how they go racing in 2026. And one way to do it was to not rush into Barcelona and potentially end up with a written off chassis and therefore more legwork to do in making more and more spares, because that's something that Williams had to deal with not that long ago, having no spare chassis, having very limited parts. They don't want to be doing that in 2026 because they might need to call upon those parts more than ever. It's a challenge, but this is one way of going about that challenge to reduce the risk. But the challenge I have for you right now is a lot easier. It's to take that pointer of your choice and move over there to click on that video and watch another Ladderman ramble. I'll see you over there. I'll get the ladder warm.